"They are laughing at her again," the Duke of Ashcroft said, and set his glass down so precisely that the crystal made no sound at all. "The lady by the third window. Tell me why." Fenwick, who had been his secretary for 9 years and his friend for 8 of them, leaned in. "Her gown, your grace. Miss Ledbury has worn the same gray silk to every assembly since Michaelmas. They say she has had it turned twice and died once." Adrian listened past the fiddles. He had learned to hear a room the way other men read one, and the Marchford Assembly rooms told him a great deal that night. The squeak of Lady Costerly's fan, the sugared cruelty running along the wall by the refreshment table, and beneath it, a woman's voice that did not tremble. "And she stands there," he said. "She does not flee to the cloakroom." "She does not." "Then she has better manners than any of them." He rose, and the sound of it changed the room. He felt the pressure of 40 faces turning. "Take me to the third window. Do not steer me. Simply walk and speak." Fenwick knew better than to offer an arm. 11 paces, then a turn to your right, then 4. There is a chair at the 5th pace, close on your left. Adrian went, tapping nothing, counting the boards under his heel and the draught from the window on his cheek. The draught came at the 11th pace exactly, as it had at every Marchford ball for 30 years. He stopped where the cold air met his face and inclined his head. "Miss Ledbury." A small silence, then that voice low and dry, "Your Grace." "There is a set forming. Will you stand up with me?" He heard her breath catch, and then, remarkably, he heard her think. Most women filled such a pause with noise. This one weighed him. "You should know," she said, "that half this room has spent the evening discussing my gown. If you dance with me, they will discuss you, and I would not have that on my conscience." "It is a gray silk, is it not?" Adrian said. "Turned twice, dyed once, and worn with more dignity than any new thing in this building. Fenwick tells me so, and Fenwick is a very honest man. Now, will you stand up with me, or must I go back to my chair and be pitied for having been refused?" He heard the laugh then. It was not the trained ripple of the season. It was a startled, unguarded sound, quickly caught behind a hand, and something in him leaned toward it like a plant toward a window. "Then I will," Marian Ledbury said, "since you asked so unfairly." Her hand came into his. It was bare. It was also, he noticed, faintly rough along the inside of the thumb, the mark of a woman who mended her own hems and cut her own quills, and he found he liked knowing it. They took the top of the set. She gave him the figures in a murmur so quiet no one else could have caught it, and she gave them plainly. "Cross now, turn, she is coming from your left, stop." No fluttering, no sweet, dreadful patience. When he mistook a turn, she said, "That was mine, not yours," and moved to meet him, and he laughed aloud for the first time in a public room in 4 years. Afterward he stood with her by the window while the fiddles retuned. May the Duke of Ashcroft ask an impertinent question? He has asked 2 already. Why the same gown, when your aunt keeps a carriage? He felt her stiffen, and then let it go. "Because my aunt's carriage and my aunt's kindness are the same thing, and both are borrowed," Marian said. "My father left debts and a good name. I chose to keep the name. It costs less in silk and more in every other way." Adrian turned his face toward the window to the cold, so that she would not think herself examined. "Then we are alike," he said. "Everyone in this room believes they know precisely what I am, and none of them has troubled to ask." "What are you, then?" "Blind," he said, "since a fever in my 26th year. Also a landlord of 4,000 acres, a tolerable rider, an indifferent flautist, and the terror of my own steward, who cannot cheat me because he does not know I keep the accounts in my head." He tilted his chin. You have not asked me how I manage. Everyone asks by the second minute. It seemed to me, she said, that you were managing. He did not answer for a moment, because the answer that rose in him was far too large for a first meeting. Whatever the ton whispered afterward, and they whispered a great deal, Adrian was certain of one thing. They believed he had not laughed at Miss Ledbury's gown because he could not see it. They were wrong. He had not laughed because he had been listening to her for 3 assemblies running, and he had never once heard her say an unkind word about anybody, including the women who said them about her. He called in Bruton Row on the Thursday. Mrs. Ledbury, the aunt, was flustered nearly to tears by the sight of a duke's carriage in a street of narrow houses, and Adrian spent a patient quarter-hour admiring a cake he could not eat because it was, he suspected, the whole week's sugar. Then Marian said, "Aunt, the Duke has been sitting in a chair with a broken caster for 10 minutes and has said nothing about it. Let us go into the garden before he goes over backward." Marian. "He would rather be told," Marian said. "Would you not?" "I would infinitely rather be told," Adrian said, and stood, and gave her his arm rather than take hers, which he had not done for any woman since the fever. The garden was 20 feet of gravel and a pear tree. She walked him along it and named things. 3 steps down, gravel changes to brick. Mind the watering can. The pear tree is on your right and it is in blossom, and it smells like nothing very much, but it is trying. He found he was smiling like a boy. "You do that well," he said. "I do it for my aunt, who is going deaf and will not admit it, so I have had practice in telling people true things without making them small." She paused. "Does it offend you? Some men would rather be helped in silence." "Some men are fools." Adrian stopped under the pear tree. "Tell me the garden as you see it, everything. Do not select." So she told him. The sooty brick, the pear blossom going brown at the edges, the neighbor's cat that considered the wall its own, the crocuses she had planted in a straight line and which had come up crooked anyway. She had a way of finding the exact word, and then one better word after it. When she stopped, Adrian discovered that he had been holding the head of his cane so hard that the silver had warmed. "Miss Ledbury," he said, "would you come to Ashcroft? Your aunt as well, and her deafness, and the broken chair if she likes. There is a library there with 11,000 books, and no one in the house who reads aloud without falling asleep." "You wish to employ me?" "No," he said. "I wish to be honest with you, and I find that difficult in a garden the size of a hearthrug. Come to Ashcroft, and I shall be honest at proper length." She was quiet, and he waited, and he had never in his life waited so badly. "We shall come," she said. They came in May. Adrian met the carriage himself on the gravel and heard her step down before her aunt did, and knew her tread already from the pause and the lightness of it. He had begun, alarmingly, to know a great many things about her. She read to him in the evenings and argued with the books, which was better than the reading. She rode out with him along the ridge, where he knew every turn by the wind and the sound of water, and he let the mare have her head and heard Marian laughing behind him, and she never once said, "Be careful." She sat with the steward and did not interfere, and afterward told Adrian only that the man's voice had gone up half a tone when the drainage accounts were mentioned, which was how the Duke of Ashcroft came to find an 80-pound error he had suspected for a year. On the 6th evening he said, without preamble, "Everyone believes I favor you because I cannot see you." The book stopped. "Yes," Marian said, "they do." "Do you believe it?" She did not answer, and the silence had an edge in it he did not like at all. The edge had a name, and it arrived 3 days later in a barouche. Lady Costerly came to Ashcroft on the pretext of a subscription list, and stayed to walk in the rose garden. And Adrian, sitting on the terrace above with a cooling cup of coffee, heard every word she said, because people who have decided a man is helpless forget that he is also within 20 feet. My dear Miss Ledbury, I speak only from kindness. It is a cruel thing, but it must be said. A man in his grace's condition cannot judge. He hears a pretty voice and a clever remark, and he builds a woman out of it. When he learns what he has taken up a gentleman's daughter with a turned gown and a father's debts, he will not blame you, he will blame himself, and he will be humiliated before the whole county. If you have any feeling for him at all, you will not let him be deceived. Adrian set the cup down. His hand was not steady, which had not happened since the fever. He heard Marian answer, and her voice was perfectly level, and that was the worst of it. "Thank you, Lady Costerly. You have been very clear." That night she did not come to the library. In the morning there was no step on the gravel, only Fenwick awkward, with a folded paper. "Read it," Adrian said. Fenwick read. She was more grateful than she could say. She had thought a great deal, and thought was a colder companion than she had expected. She would not be the reason a great house was laughed at, nor the reason he was ever pitied twice, once for his sight and once for his choice. She had gone back to Bruton Row with her aunt. She asked him not to write. "Is that all?" "There is a line at the bottom, Your Grace. It says, 'The crocuses came up crooked, and I loved them anyway. Please remember that I told you the truth about everything, including this.'" Adrian sat for a long time in a room. He could have crossed blindfold on the day he was born. "Fenwick," he said at last, "what day is the Marchford ball?" "Friday, Your Grace, but—" "Order the carriage for Thursday, and find me the milliner in Bruton Row, and the woman who does Mrs. Ledbury's mending, and the girl who lights their fires. Not for gifts, for questions." He stood. "I am told I build a woman out of a voice. Very well. Let us discover how much of her I have actually got." He asked his questions for 2 days, and the answers he gathered were not the sort a man could see from across a ballroom. The Marchford rooms on Friday were as loud as ever. He came in late and alone, and the room hushed the way it always did, and he stood under the chandelier he had never seen and listened until he found her. 11 paces, turn right, 4, and the cold draught of the third window on his cheek. "Miss Ledbury." "Your Grace, not level now, not quite." "You asked me not to write," Adrian said. "You did not ask me not to speak." He raised his voice then, pitched for the whole room, the voice he used at quarter sessions. "Lady Costerly, you are by the refreshment table. Your fan wants oiling. You told this lady that a blind man builds a woman out of a voice and cannot know what he has taken up. Permit me to be examined." "Your Grace," someone began. "Marian Ledbury is 24 years old and stands a little under my shoulder. Her hair is dark and will not stay where it is put. There are 2 pins that fail her by 10 o'clock, always the same 2. Her voice drops when she is telling the truth and rises when she is being kind about somebody she dislikes. She has a mark on the inside of her right thumb from cutting her own quills and mending her own hems, because she will not let her aunt pay for either. Her gown is gray silk, turned twice, dyed once. There is a mend at the left shoulder 6 inches long, and she made it herself in one evening in December, so that she might come to a ball where she knew she would be laughed at, because her aunt had wished to see her dance." He heard the whole room stop breathing. "She reads Herodotus badly and argues with him beautifully. She carries barley sugar for the lodgekeeper's grandson, who is shy of her and takes it anyway. She found an error of £80 in my drainage accounts, and told me of it in 9 words, and never once asked what it might be worth to her. In March, she gave her only good shawl to a woman on the Chelmsford Road, and told her aunt she had lost it, and she has never mentioned it to me, and I know it because I went and asked. Adrian turned his face very slightly, unerringly, toward the refreshment table. Now, which of us has troubled to look at her? Nobody spoke. Lady Costerly's fan did not move. Adrian turned back and lowered his voice until it was only for the woman in front of him. You wrote that you would not have me pitied twice. Hear me. I have been pitied every day for 11 years, and I have borne it, and it has never yet cost me an hour's sleep. What has cost me sleep is 1 week without your step on my gravel. He put out his hand, palm up, and left it there in the open air where anyone might refuse it. I do not ask you to be my eyes. I have my own arrangements, and they are excellent, and I am insufferable about them. I ask you to be my wife, and to tell me true things without making me small, and to let me tell you the same for the rest of a very long life. Marian, will you? The pause was the longest of his life, and he stood through it without moving, because he had learned that a man who cannot see must never look as though he is falling. Then her hand came down into his, bare, warm, faintly rough along the inside of the thumb. Yes, she said, and her voice dropped, which was how he knew. He raised her knuckles to his lips, there in front of the county, and heard the room break into a rush of talk, and did not care for any of it. There is a set forming, he said. You will have to tell me the figures. You know them perfectly well. I do, Adrian agreed, but I like being told. They were married at Ashcroft in September, in a chapel he paced out beforehand so that he could walk to her without being led. He did walk to her, 12 paces and a step, and stopped exactly where he meant to, and heard her whisper, show off, and answered, entirely. And the parson had to wait for them both to compose themselves. She wore the gray silk. He had offered her Lyon brocade and Brussels lace and anything in London. She had said the gray was the gown she had been brave in, and Adrian, who had built nothing out of a voice, understood her exactly. Years afterward, when the Ridge Road had been widened for a duchess who insisted on riding it beside him, a visitor was shown the gown in its glass case in the long gallery, and asked why a great house preserved so plain a thing. Adrian, then graying at the temples and still unable to see it, put his hand out and found his wife's without fumbling, the way he had 10,000 times. Because a roomful of people once looked at it, he said, and only one of them was worth looking at. The gown reminds me which was which. And Marian, Duchess of Ashcroft, took the 2 pins out of her hair as she always did at 10 o'clock, and set them in his open palm, and said the crocuses had come up crooked again, and he said that he was very glad.